Hello, everyone. If you enjoy my channel, please support me with one like, one subscribe, and one share.
The shower meltdown. Imagine you are standing under a hot shower, the water so loud it almost covers the sound of your own crying. You are 40 years old. Your hair is wet and stuck to your face like seaweed. Your hands are shaking, not from the cold, but from a fear so deep it lives somewhere behind your ribs. You have just made a decision that everyone around you called crazy. You left a marriage that had been dead for years. You packed your 2 children into 3 suitcases. And now you are in a small rental bathroom in a city you cannot even pronounce correctly in English, asking yourself one question: what have I done? This is not the beginning of a movie. This is not a motivational quote on Instagram. This is real life. This was my life. And if you are watching this video right now because you are also stuck in a job, stuck in a relationship, stuck in a country where you feel invisible, or simply stuck inside your own fear of speaking English, then stay with me. Because what happened next in that shower changed everything. And I promise you, by the end of this 90-minute story, you will not only improve your slow English listening, reading, and speaking skills. You will also see that starting over at 40, or 50, or even 60, is not the end. It is actually the most terrifying, ridiculous, and wonderful beginning you will ever experience. So let me rewind a little. Before the shower meltdown, there was a version of me who thought she had everything figured out. I was married for 15 years. I had 2 beautiful children. I lived in a country where I spoke my native language every single day. Where I knew which grocery store sold the best bread and which neighbor would water my plants when I traveled. That sounds nice, right? It was not. Because inside that perfect-looking house, I was slowly disappearing. My husband and I had stopped talking years ago. We shared meals in silence. We slept on opposite sides of a king-sized bed, and I remember one night I actually measured the space between us with my hand. It was almost a meter. You do not need a therapist to tell you that a meter of silence in a marriage is a scream. But I stayed. Why? Because leaving is scary. Because starting over sounds great in movies, but in real life, starting over means admitting you wasted years. It means telling your children that their parents will not live together anymore. It means stepping into a world where you have no safety net. And for me, it also meant moving to a completely different country, the United States of America. Why America? Because I had a sister in Ohio. Because I needed a place so far away from my old life that I could not accidentally run into my past at a supermarket. Because I was desperate. And desperation, my friend, is a surprisingly good fuel. Now, here is where the English part becomes real. When I landed in the US, I thought my English was okay. I had studied it in school. I could read news articles. I could understand movies with subtitles. But standing in an American airport with 2 tired children and 3 heavy suitcases, I realized something horrible: I could not speak. A security officer asked me, "Ma'am, are these your bags?" And my brain froze. I knew every word in that sentence. But my mouth would not move. I just nodded like a broken doll. My daughter, who was 7 at the time, tugged my sleeve and whispered in our language, "Mom, say yes." That was the moment I understood. Knowing English and speaking English are 2 completely different things. One lives in your head. The other lives in your courage. And my courage was somewhere back in the old country, still lying on that empty side of the bed. So I did what any rational 40-year-old woman would do. I went to the bathroom, locked the door, turned on the shower, and cried. I cried for the marriage I lost. I cried for the friends I left behind. I cried because I could not even answer a simple question at an airport. But here is the weird thing about crying under a shower. The water washes away the evidence. Nobody sees your tears. Nobody hears your sobs. And after 20 minutes of feeling absolutely pathetic, something shifted. I remember looking at my wet, tired face in the bathroom mirror. My eyes were red. My nose was running. I looked like a mess. And I said out loud, in very slow, broken English, "You are not dead. So, move." That sentence was grammatically terrible. But it was the most honest English I had ever spoken. Because it came from a place of survival. And survival, unlike perfection, does not need good grammar. That was the day I decided to treat English not as a test, but as a tool. I stopped trying to sound like a native speaker. I stopped worrying about prepositions and past tense. I started listening to everything: songs, podcasts, supermarket announcements, children's cartoons, at half speed. I repeated phrases like a parrot. I made 1,000 mistakes. And every night, after putting my kids to bed, I sat on the floor of that tiny rental apartment and whispered stories to myself in English. Stories about my day. Stories about my fear. Stories about a woman who was starting over at 40. I did not know it then, but I was doing something powerful. I was learning English the way a child learns, slowly, badly, without shame. And that is exactly what I want you to do as you watch this video. Do not try to understand every word. Do not pause every time you hear an unfamiliar phrase. Just let the story wash over you like that shower washed over me. Because the goal here is not perfection. The goal is to feel the language. To let it become familiar. To realize that you, too, can start over at any age. So let me ask you again, was starting over at 40 scary? Yes. It was terrifying. But was it worth it? That answer is going to take us through 11 more chapters of this story. You will hear about my first American winter, about the loneliness that almost broke me, about a parking lot encounter that turned into love. About my daughter correcting my English, and about the quiet Christmas morning when I finally understood that I had not lost everything. I had found myself. And along the way, you will practice slow English listening, reading, and speaking without even realizing it. Because the best way to learn a language is to forget you are learning. The best way to learn is to fall into a story that matters to you. So take a deep breath. Turn off your distractions. And let us continue. Because right now, somewhere in the world, another woman is standing under a shower, crying, and asking if she still has time to change her life. You and I both know the answer. The empty side of the bed. Let me tell you about a bed. Not just any bed, a king-sized bed with white sheets and 4 wooden posts, a bed I once thought would hold my family for decades. 3 years before the shower meltdown, I started sleeping on the very edge of that bed. You know the feeling? When your body tenses up so you do not accidentally touch the person next to you? When you lie so still that your arm falls asleep, but you do not move because moving might wake them up. And waking them up means pretending everything is fine? That was my every night for 547 nights. I counted. Not on purpose at first. But after a while, the counting became a game. How many more nights will I survive this? My husband and I did not fight. That was the strange part. We did not scream. We did not throw plates. We simply stopped existing to each other. He came home from work, ate dinner while looking at his phone, watched television in his armchair, and went to bed without saying goodnight. I became a ghost in my own house. A ghost who cooked, cleaned, did laundry, helped with homework, paid bills, and smiled at neighbors so nobody would ask, "Hey, is everything okay at home?" Here is what nobody tells you about a dying marriage. It is not a dramatic explosion. It is a slow leak. Like air leaving a balloon. One day you are full and colorful. The next day you are wrinkled and lying on the floor, and you cannot remember where the hole came from. For me, the hole appeared the year I turned 38. My mother was diagnosed with cancer back in my home country. I asked my husband if we could fly to see her together. He said, "We don't have the budget." Not "I'm sorry." Not "let me check my vacation days." Just "we don't have the budget." So I went alone. I sat by my mother's hospital bed for 3 weeks. I held her hand while she cried. And when I came back home, my husband had rearranged the living room furniture. That was his way of welcoming me. New sofa placement. No hug. No "how is your mom?" Nothing. That night, I lay in bed and realized I was sleeping next to a stranger. A stranger I had married 15 years earlier. A stranger who knew my allergies, my birthday, the name of my first pet, but had somehow forgotten how to say, "I see that you are hurting." The empty side of the bed started as a metaphor. Then it became real. I began sleeping so close to the edge that I almost fell off twice. My daughter, who was 6 at the time, once asked me, "Mommy, why is there a big space between you and Daddy?" I did not know how to answer in our language, let alone in English. So I said, "Because it is hot." She accepted that lie. Children accept so many lies from us because they want to believe the world is safe. But I could not accept my own lie anymore. So one night, after my husband had fallen asleep with his back turned to me, I got up. I walked to the bathroom. I sat on the cold tile floor. And I whispered to myself in broken English, "This is not a life." Those 4 words. That was the beginning of the end. Now, why am I telling you this in an English learning video? Because I know that some of you watching right now are also lying in a bed that feels empty, even if someone is next to you. Some of you are staying in a relationship because you are afraid of being alone, afraid of speaking a different language in a different country. Afraid that your English is not good enough to start over. Let me tell you something that science has proven but culture hides. Your brain processes emotional pain in the same way it processes physical pain. That tightness in your chest? That knot in your stomach? That is real. Your body knows you are stuck before your mind admits it. And when you suppress that pain for too long, when you keep smiling, keep nodding, keep saying "I am fine," your brain starts to numb everything. Including your ability to learn. Including your motivation to practice English. You cannot grow a new language inside a dying emotional space. It is like trying to grow flowers in frozen soil. Nothing blooms there. I stayed in that marriage for 2 more years after the bathroom floor moment. 2 years of waking up early just to have coffee alone. 2 years of watching romantic comedies and crying at the parts where the couple actually talks to each other. 2 years of telling myself, maybe it will get better. But here is the truth about hope. Sometimes hope is just fear in a pretty dress. Sometimes you are not hoping for change. You are just too scared to leave. And there is nothing wrong with that. Fear is not weakness. Fear is your brain trying to protect you from the unknown. But the unknown, as terrifying as it is, also holds every possibility you have never dared to imagine. The final night in that bed, I did something small but huge. I reached my hand across the empty space. Just my hand. Palm up. An offering. My husband was awake. I knew because his breathing was too fast for sleep. He looked at my hand. He looked at my face. Then he turned away and pulled the blanket over his shoulder. That was the moment I understood. You cannot fix a connection that only you are trying to save. A marriage is not a solo project. A life is not a solo project. And learning English is not a solo project either, not really. You need a reason. You need a story that makes the effort worth it. That night, I got up, walked to my children's room, and watched them sleep. Their small faces. Their quiet breathing. And I thought, I am not leaving for myself. I am leaving for them. And for the woman I used to be before I forgot her name. The next morning, I called my sister in Ohio. I said, "Can we stay with you for a few months?" She said yes without asking why. That is what sisters do. And that is how the empty side of the bed became the first page of a completely different story. Not a happy story yet. Not a successful story yet. Just an honest one. Because before you can learn to speak a new language, you have to learn to speak the truth. Even if it is only a whisper. Even if it is only to yourself on a cold bathroom floor. So let me ask you, what is the empty side of your bed? What are you staying in that you should leave? And what would happen if you finally reached your hand across that space, not to them, but to yourself? Answer that question slowly. In English if you can. Or in your own language. Just answer it. Because that answer is the first word of your new story. Packing a life into 3 suitcases. Here's a question I never thought I would ask myself at 40. What do you keep when you can only keep 3 bags? Not 3 storage units. Not 3 rooms. 3 suitcases. The kind you drag behind you through airports, the kind with zippers that always get stuck halfway. I stood in my bedroom for 3 hours after my husband left for work, staring at everything I had collected over 20 years. Wedding photos in a silver frame. My mother's ceramic vase with the tiny crack on the side. Winter coats. Summer dresses. Shoes I had not worn since before my first pregnancy. Books with underlined passages that once made me feel less alone. A teddy bear my daughter had slept with every night since she was born. My son's first drawing of our family, 4 stick figures under a yellow sun. How do you pack a life into 3 suitcases? The answer is, you do not. You cry. You hold things to your chest and smell them. You put them back on the shelf. You pick them up again. You realize that most of what you own is just decoration for a life you no longer want to live. And then you make decisions that feel like cutting off your own fingers. I started with the practical stuff. Clothes for 2 weeks. Important documents, passports, birth certificates, divorce papers that were not yet final but already felt like a funeral invitation. Medicine. Chargers. 1 frying pan because my sister in Ohio said her kitchen was small. Then came the impossible choices. My wedding ring, the thin gold band I had worn for 15 years, I left it on the bathroom sink. Not because I was angry. Because I was done. Some endings do not need a ceremony. They just need a sink and a woman walking away. My daughter's teddy bear, the one with the missing eye, went into suitcase number 2. My son's favorite blanket, the blue one with the frayed edges, went into suitcase number 3. My own childhood photo album? It did not fit. I took out 10 pictures and left the rest in a cardboard box marked trash. That box broke something in me. Not because I did not love those memories, but because I had finally learned that memories live inside you, not inside paper. You can burn every photograph and still remember the sound of your grandmother's laugh. The brain is strange like that. It keeps what matters. It releases what does not. And sometimes, releasing is the most loving thing you can do. Now, here is where English becomes part of the packing story. While I was sorting through my life, I was also trying to learn American phrases that would help me survive. I had a small notebook where I wrote down words I thought I would need. Toilet became restroom. Flat became apartment. Lift became elevator. Nappy became diaper. Rubbish became trash. Every new word felt like a small betrayal of my old self. But every new word also felt like a key to a door I had not opened yet. I practiced saying these words out loud while I folded shirts and threw away old receipts. Trash. I am throwing away the trash. Diaper. Where are the diapers? Apartment. We are moving to a small apartment. My son, who was 5 at the time, watched me from the doorway. He asked, Mom, why are you talking to yourself? I said, because I am practicing English. He laughed. Children laugh at everything. That is one of their superpowers. Then he sat next to me and said, I can practice too. Say spaghetti. I said spaghetti with my accent, and he said it again with his perfect American pronunciation. We repeated that word 10 times. 15 times. 20 times. By the end, we were both laughing so hard that I forgot, for one sweet minute, that I was about to leave everything I had ever known. The night before our flight, my children fell asleep on the floor between the 3 suitcases. They looked like little refugees in a movie. But they were not scared because I had not shown them my fear. That is the secret of motherhood, by the way. You can be falling apart inside, but you keep your face calm so your children do not inherit your panic. I covered them with a blanket and sat in the dark, looking at those 3 suitcases. 1 black. 1 red. 1 blue. 20 years of my life compressed into 3 rectangles. I thought about all the things I had left behind, my career, my friends, my language, my street, my coffee shop. The tree in my backyard where I had watched birds every morning. And I thought about all the things I was taking, 2 children who still believed in magic, a broken heart that was still beating. A brain that knew maybe 2,000 English words, and a ridiculous, desperate, possibly stupid hope that somewhere in America, a different version of me was waiting to be born. You might be wondering, was that responsible? Moving to another country with almost no money, no job, no support system except a sister in Ohio? No. It was not responsible. It was not smart. It was not the kind of decision any sane person would recommend. But here's what I have learned about sanity. Sometimes it is just another word for fear dressed in a suit and tie. Sometimes the most responsible choice is the one that kills you slowly, year by year, day by day. Until you wake up at 60 and realize you never really lived. I did not want that. I had already lived that for 5 years. So I chose the irresponsible path. I chose the 3 suitcases. I chose the flight with 2 layovers and a screaming toddler in the seat behind me. I chose the unknown because the known had become a cage. And a cage, no matter how comfortable, is still a cage. The morning we left, I did not look back at the house. I kept my eyes forward. My daughter asked, "Are we ever coming back?" I said, "We are going forward." She accepted that answer because she was 7 and because she trusted me. That trust was the heaviest thing in all 3 suitcases. Heavier than the winter coats. Heavier than the books. Heavier than the frying pan. Because I knew, deep in my bones, that I had to earn that trust every single day in a country where I could barely order a sandwich. But I also knew something else. Children do not need perfect parents. They need brave ones. They need parents who try, fail, cry, get up, and try again. They need parents who pack 3 suitcases instead of staying in a dead marriage because staying would teach them the wrong lesson. The wrong lesson is, your comfort matters more than your truth. The right lesson is, you can always start over. Even at 40. Even with nothing. Even with broken English. So let me ask you, as you listen to this story slowly, sentence by sentence, word by word. What are you holding on to that you need to pack into a suitcase and leave behind? A relationship? A job? A country? A belief that you are too old to change? Your brain will tell you to stay. Your brain loves safety. But your spirit? Your spirit loves the airport. Your spirit loves the boarding pass. Your spirit loves the moment when the wheels leave the ground and you look out the window and see your old life getting smaller and smaller until it is just a dot. That dot is not your home anymore. Your home is wherever you decide to land. And you can decide that right now. In English. Slowly. America felt like Mars. February in Ohio feels like a freezer opening its mouth and swallowing you whole. I stepped off the plane with my 2 children and 3 suitcases, and the air hit my face like a slap. 15 degrees Fahrenheit. -9 Celsius. I had never felt cold like that in my entire life. In my home country, winter meant a light jacket and maybe an umbrella. Here, the cold burned my nostrils. It made my eyes water. It turned my fingers into tiny icicles within 60 seconds. My daughter started crying because her ears hurt. My son hid his face in my coat. And I stood there at baggage claim, shivering, exhausted, and thinking, what kind of planet did I just land on? America felt like Mars. Not because of the people. Not because of the language. Because everything was different in ways I had never imagined. The plugs were different. The electrical voltage was different. The light switches went up instead of down. The toilets had so much water in them that I actually jumped back the first time I flushed. The supermarket was a maze of words I sort of knew but could not connect to real objects. Half and half. Creamer. Casserole. Zucchini. Cilantro. I had studied English for years, but nobody taught me the word zucchini. Nobody taught me that Americans say restroom instead of toilet and sneakers instead of trainers and trash instead of rubbish and elevator instead of lift and gas station instead of petrol station and vacation instead of holiday and line instead of queue and apartment instead of flat and cookie instead of biscuit and fries instead of chips and chips instead of crisps. I felt like a spy who had memorized the wrong manual. Every sentence I tried to speak came out wrong. Every cultural rule I thought I understood turned out to be a trap. The first week, I made a fool of myself at a grocery store. I needed milk for my children. I walked up and down the dairy aisle for 15 minutes looking for the word milk. It was everywhere. Gallon jugs. Half-gallon cartons. Organic. Lactose-free. Whole. 2%. 1%. Skim. Almond. Soy. Oat. I stood there frozen, not because I did not recognize the word milk, but because I had never seen so many types of milk in my life. Back home, milk came in one kind, milk. Here, choosing milk felt like taking a multiple-choice exam with no correct answer. An old woman with white hair and a kind face saw me staring. She asked, "Are you okay, dear?" I understood every word. But my mouth could not form a response. So I just nodded and walked away. I left without buying milk. That is how ridiculous my life had become. A 40-year-old woman, a mother of two, a former professional in her home country, could not buy milk because she was too ashamed to speak imperfect English. I sat in my sister's car in the parking lot and cried for 10 minutes. My children were not with me that time. My sister had kept them at home. So I cried alone, in a cold parking lot, surrounded by cars with license plates that said Ohio, the heart of it all. And I thought, the heart of it all? My heart is broken. My heart is back on that airplane somewhere over the Atlantic Ocean. My heart is in 3 suitcases that do not even fit in my sister's spare room. But here is what I discovered in that parking lot. I discovered that crying is not failure. Crying is your brain releasing pressure so you do not explode. There is actual science behind this. Emotional tears contain stress hormones like cortisol. When you cry, your body is literally washing away the chemicals that keep you frozen in fear. I did not know that then. I just knew that after 10 minutes of sobbing, my breathing slowed down. My shoulders relaxed. And I walked back into that grocery store, picked up the first gallon of milk I saw, 2%. Because the label had a cow on it, and went to the checkout. The cashier said, "Did you find everything okay?" I said, "Yes. Thank you." 2 words. 2 small, simple, grammatically correct words. But they were the first words I had spoken to an American stranger without my heart trying to escape through my throat. That was my first victory. Not a job. Not a friend. Not a new apartment. Just 2 words at a grocery store checkout. And I learned something important that day. Progress is not always big. Sometimes progress is a gallon of milk and a shaky smile. The culture shock did not stop at the grocery store. Everything in America was louder, bigger, faster, and brighter than what I was used to. The television had 200 channels. The roads had 4 lanes in each direction. The pizza slices were the size of my face. The coffee cups were the size of my head. People said, "How are you?" but they did not wait for an answer. They kept walking. The first time someone did that to me, I stood there with my mouth open, preparing a real answer about my real feelings. And they were already 10 feet away. That hurt. Until I realized it was not rudeness. It was just a different rhythm. In America, "How are you?" means hello. It does not mean please share your emotional state. Nobody told me that. Nobody gives you a handbook for cultural translation. You learn by embarrassing yourself. You learn by saying the wrong thing at the wrong time. You learn by laughing at yourself so you do not cry. And slowly, very slowly, Mars stopped feeling like Mars. The cold still hurt. The words still got stuck. But the sky started to look less red and more blue. The people started to look less like strangers and more like humans who were also just trying to survive their own invisible battles. My sister's apartment was small. 2 bedrooms. 1 bathroom. A kitchen so tiny that 2 people could not stand in it at the same time. My children slept on a pull-out couch in the living room. I slept on a mattress on the floor in the corner of my sister's bedroom. Every night, after everyone fell asleep, I would pull out my notebook and write down 5 new English words I had heard that day. Receipt. Sidewalk. Drive-through. Laundromat. Microwave. I would say them out loud, slowly, 5 times each. Receipt. Sidewalk. Drive-through. Laundromat. Microwave. The words felt like rocks in my mouth. Hard. Sharp. Wrong. But every night, they felt slightly less wrong. And every morning, I woke up and tried again. Because that is what starting over looks like. It is not a movie montage with uplifting music. It is 1,000 small, boring, humiliating repetitions until one day you realize you are not humiliated anymore. You are just living. And living, even on Mars, is better than dying on Earth. When you can't even order coffee. Let me tell you about the most humiliating 30 seconds of my entire adult life. It happened at a Starbucks in a suburb of Columbus, Ohio, exactly 3 weeks after I arrived in America. I had saved $5 from the small amount of cash I brought with me. I wanted to buy myself a treat. A coffee. Just one coffee. Something warm to hold in my hands on a freezing February morning while my children were at their new school. Crying because they did not understand their teachers, and I was alone in my sister's apartment, slowly going insane from silence. So I walked to the Starbucks. I practiced the sentence in my head the entire way. I would like a medium hot coffee with milk, please. Simple, right? 12 words. I knew every word. I had said them to myself in the mirror at least 40 times. I was ready. I stood in line. My heart was beating fast, but I told myself, you can do this. You bought milk last week. Coffee is easier than milk. The person in front of me finished their order. The barista, a young woman with pink hair and a nose ring, looked at me and smiled. She said, "Hi there. What can I get started for you?" And my brain erased itself. Every English word I had ever learned disappeared. Gone. Poof. Like someone had pulled a plug inside my head. I opened my mouth. Nothing came out. I closed my mouth. I opened it again. A small, strange noise came out. Not a word. Just a sound. Like a mouse being stepped on. The barista tilted her head. "Ma'am? Are you okay?" I felt my face turn red. Then hot. Then burning. My eyes started to water. I turned around and walked out of the Starbucks without saying a single word. I walked 3 blocks to a public bench, sat down, put my head in my hands, and cried like a child who had lost her mother in a supermarket. A stranger sat next to me. An older man with a beard and a faded baseball cap. He did not say anything. He just handed me a tissue and sat there quietly for 5 minutes. Then he got up and left. I never saw him again. But I have never forgotten that tissue. Because that tissue was the first kind thing an American stranger had done for me without expecting anything in return. That tissue said, "You are having a hard time. I see you. I will not fix you. But I will sit with you for a moment." That is what kindness looks like. It is not grand gestures. It is a tissue on a cold bench. Now, why am I telling you this humiliating story? Because I know that some of you watching this video have also walked out of places without ordering. Some of you have pretended to be on your phone so you would not have to speak English. Some of you have pointed at menus instead of saying the names of the dishes. Some of you have let your children order for you because their accents are better than yours. Some of you have stayed home instead of going to a party because the thought of making small talk in English made your stomach hurt for 3 days in advance. I know this because I lived it. And I want to tell you something that nobody told me back then. This is not a sign of weakness. This is a sign that your brain is working exactly the way it is supposed to work. When you are under stress, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for language, decision-making, and self-control, literally shuts down. It hands control over to your amygdala, which is the ancient, reptilian part of your brain that only cares about survival. Your amygdala does not care about coffee. Your amygdala does not care about grammar. Your amygdala only cares about keeping you alive. And when you are in a new country, surrounded by unfamiliar sounds, faces, and rules, your amygdala decides that speaking a foreign language is a threat. So it freezes your tongue. It empties your vocabulary. It makes you forget the word coffee. This is not a personal failure. This is neuroscience. Your brain is trying to protect you from what it perceives as danger. The problem is, the danger is not real. Starbucks is not a lion. The barista with pink hair is not going to eat you. But your brain does not know that yet. Your brain is still learning. So how do you fix this? You do not fix it by studying more grammar. You do not fix it by downloading another app. You fix it by teaching your amygdala that English is safe. And the only way to teach your amygdala that English is safe is to have small, low-stakes, positive experiences with English. Over and over and over again. This is called exposure therapy. It is the same technique used to treat phobias. If you are afraid of spiders, you do not start by holding a tarantula. You start by looking at a picture of a spider. Then a video. Then a spider in a glass jar across the room. Then closer. Then closer. Then eventually, maybe, you let one crawl on your hand. Your fear of speaking English works the same way. You do not start by ordering coffee at a busy Starbucks. You start by saying one word to yourself in the mirror. Coffee. Then you say it to your sister. Coffee. Then you point at a coffee cup and say, coffee to a cashier at an empty grocery store at 7 a.m. when nobody is watching. Then you try the Starbucks again, but this time you write your order on a piece of paper and hand it to the barista. Then you say it out loud. Then one day, without even realizing it, you order coffee and you do not think about it at all. That day will come. I promise you. It came for me. After the Starbucks disaster, I did not try again for 2 weeks. I was too embarrassed. But then I got desperate. I missed coffee. Real coffee. Not the instant powder my sister had in her pantry. So I went back. Same Starbucks. Same barista with pink hair. This time, I had written my order on a sticky note. Medium hot coffee with milk. I walked up to the counter, my hands shaking, and I held up the sticky note. I did not say anything. I just held it up like a hostage negotiator asking for safe passage. The barista looked at the note. She looked at me. And then she did something wonderful. She said, "Medium hot coffee with milk?" Coming right up. She did not make fun of me. She did not ask why I could not speak. She just took the note, made the coffee, and handed it to me with a warm smile. I paid. I left. I walked outside and took a sip. It was the best coffee I had ever tasted. Not because of the beans. Because I had earned it. I had faced my fear, failed, faced it again, and survived. That is the secret that no language teacher will tell you. Learning English is not about becoming fluent. It is about becoming brave enough to be bad at it in front of other people. It is about ordering coffee with a shaking voice. It is about asking for directions and saying the wrong street name. It is about saying "I am fine" when someone asks "How are you?" Even though you are not fine, because at least you said something. Every word you speak in English, even the wrong ones, is a victory. Every time you open your mouth and sound stupid, you are rewiring your brain. You are telling your amygdala, this is not danger. This is just coffee. And slowly, very slowly, your prefrontal cortex wakes up. Words come back. Sentences form. And one day, you realize you are not translating in your head anymore. You are just thinking in English. Not perfectly. Not like a native speaker. But well enough to live. Well enough to order coffee. Well enough to start again. So here's my challenge to you today. Find one small, low-stakes English interaction. Order something. Ask a simple question. Say thank you to a stranger. It does not have to be perfect. It just has to be brave. And when you do it, remember me standing in that Starbucks with a sticky note, shaking like a leaf, and still trying. Because trying is never embarrassing. Giving up is embarrassing. Trying is beautiful. The loneliness that teaches. There is a specific kind of loneliness that only happens in a foreign country during winter. It is not the loneliness of being alone. It is the loneliness of being surrounded by people and still feeling invisible. For 4 months after we arrived in Ohio, I had no friends. Not one. My sister worked during the day. Her friends were kind but busy. The other mothers at my children's school smiled at me in the hallway, but they did not invite me for coffee. Why would they? I could barely say hello without sounding like a broken robot. So I spent my days alone in that small apartment, staring out the window at the gray Ohio sky, watching snow fall on streets I did not know. Listening to sounds I could not name. The heater made a clanking noise every 20 minutes. The refrigerator hummed in a frequency that slowly drove me insane. And the silence, oh, the silence was the worst part. Back home, my life had been loud. Neighbors shouting. Children playing. Street vendors calling out prices. Here, everything was muffled. The snow absorbed sound. The walls were thick. The people spoke in low, efficient voices. I felt like I had been dropped into a library where I was not allowed to speak because my accent would disturb the peace. Every afternoon, I would pick up my children from school, and they would tell me about their day in a mixture of English and our native language. They were learning faster than me. Children are sponges. Their brains are designed to absorb new sounds without judgment. My brain, at 40, was a rusty filter. It wanted to translate everything. It wanted to find patterns. It wanted to be correct before it was willing to be fluent. That need for correctness was my enemy. And loneliness was my teacher. Here is what I did to survive. Every night, after my children fell asleep on the pull-out couch, I turned on the television. Not children's cartoons. Not news, because news was too fast and too depressing. I watched reality shows. Home renovation shows. Cooking competitions. Shows where people talked slowly, repeated themselves, and used simple vocabulary. I watched Fixer Upper because Chip and Joanna Gaines spoke clearly and smiled a lot. I watched Chopped because the judges used the same phrases over and over. The presentation is beautiful. The flavors are balanced. You did not cook the chicken all the way through. I watched with subtitles on. First in my native language. Then in English. Then no subtitles at all. I would pause the show every few minutes and repeat what the people said. The presentation is beautiful. I would say it to the empty room. The flavors are balanced. My voice sounded strange without an accent. You did not cook the chicken all the way through. That sentence made me laugh because I had definitely undercooked chicken many times in my life. Laughing alone in an apartment is weird. But it is also healing. Laughter tells your brain that you are safe. That you are not in danger. That the silence is not a threat. So I laughed at my own pronunciation. I celebrated when I understood a whole sentence without pausing. I gave myself a gold star in my notebook every time I learned 5 new words. I was my own teacher, my own student, and my own cheering section. And slowly, very slowly, the loneliness started to feel less like a punishment and more like a gift. Because loneliness, when you stop fighting it, becomes solitude. And solitude is where real learning happens. The science backs this up. Studies show that the brain consolidates new information during periods of rest and quiet. When you are constantly surrounded by noise and social demands, your brain is too busy processing inputs to build new neural pathways. But when you are alone, truly alone, without distractions, your brain enters a state called default mode network. This is when it sorts through memories, connects new information to old knowledge, and creates long-term learning. Those quiet hours I spent watching television alone were not wasted. They were my brain's most productive hours. I was not just learning English. I was teaching my brain that English was safe enough to process deeply. You cannot rush this. Language learning is not a sprint. It is not even a marathon. It is a slow, invisible growth, like roots spreading underground. You cannot see them. You cannot measure them day by day. But one morning, you wake up and a flower has broken through the soil. That flower is a sentence you understand without translation. That flower is a word that comes to your mouth without searching. That flower is a conversation you survive without crying afterward. One night in late March, something shifted. I was watching the Great British Baking Show because the British accents were actually easier for me to understand than American ones. Slower. More precise. A contestant said, "I am absolutely chuffed with my sponge." I did not know what chuffed meant. I paused the TV. I looked it up. It meant pleased. But that is not what mattered. What mattered was that I had recognized a word I did not know, paused, looked it up, and kept watching. That is the cycle of learning. Not understanding everything. Not being perfect. just noticing the gap and filling it. One word at a time. That night, I wrote in my notebook, chuffed equals pleased. I am chuffed that I understood the rest of the sentence. Then I laughed at myself again. And for the first time in months, the apartment did not feel like a cage. It felt like a classroom. A quiet, lonely, beautiful classroom where I was the only student and the only teacher. I started talking to myself in English all day long. Narrating my actions. I am opening the refrigerator. I am pouring milk into a cup. I am putting on my coat. I am walking to the bus stop. I sounded insane. I did not care. Because every sentence I spoke out loud was a brick in the foundation of my new life. And a foundation does not need to be beautiful. It just needs to be strong. By the time spring came, I had watched over 200 hours of American television. I had filled 3 notebooks with new words and phrases. I had spoken more English to myself than to any other human. But when my sister's neighbor knocked on the door one afternoon and asked, "Hey, could you sign for this package?" I have to run to work, I understood her. And I answered, "Yes. I can sign." 4 words. Not perfect grammar. Not a full sentence. But enough. She handed me the package. I signed my name. She said, "Thanks so much." I said, "You are welcome." And then she left. That was it. A tiny interaction. Less than 10 seconds. But I walked back into the apartment and sat down because my legs were shaking. I had just spoken to a real American person without preparing. Without a script. Without crying afterward. And I realized that the loneliness, the long, cold, brutal winter of isolation, had given me something precious. It had given me the space to learn without shame. Because when nobody is watching, you can make 1,000 mistakes. And 1,000 mistakes later, you are still standing. Still trying. Still growing. The loneliness taught me that I did not need an audience to become fluent. I just needed time, patience, and the willingness to sound ridiculous in an empty room. And if I could do that at 40, in a country that felt like Mars, with 3 suitcases and a broken heart, then you can do it too. Wherever you are. Whatever your age. Turn off the noise. Embrace the quiet. And let the loneliness teach you. It is a harsh teacher. But it is also the most honest one you will ever have. A tiny yes in a parking lot. Love is the last thing you expect to find when you cannot even order coffee. But life, as I was slowly learning, has a cruel and hilarious sense of timing. It was May. The snow had finally melted. The trees in Ohio had turned that ridiculous shade of green that almost hurts to look at because it is so alive. I had been in America for 3 months. My English was still terrible by any objective standard, but I had graduated from mute to functional. I could order coffee. I could buy milk. I could say thank you and excuse me and I am sorry, I do not understand without bursting into tears. I considered this a massive victory. My children, meanwhile, had become little Americans. They spoke English on the playground with no accent. They corrected my pronunciation at dinner. My daughter once said, "Mom, it's not bucket, it's basket." I wanted to be offended, but I was mostly proud. They were thriving. I was surviving. And sometimes, surviving is enough. One Saturday afternoon, I drove my sister's old minivan to a grocery store parking lot. I was not there to shop. I was there because my daughter had left her favorite jacket in the shopping cart 3 days earlier, and I had called the store. And they said it was in the lost and found. So I parked the van, took a deep breath, and walked inside. I found the jacket. I said thank you to the customer service desk. I walked back to the parking lot. And then I could not find my car. Not because I was lost. Because every minivan in Ohio looks exactly the same. Gray. Boring. Anonymous. I walked up and down 3 rows, pressing the unlock button on my key fob, but nothing happened. The battery was dead. Of course it was. Because the universe had decided that this particular Saturday was the day I would hit rock bottom in a parking lot. I stood there, holding my daughter's jacket, surrounded by identical gray minivans, and I felt the familiar heat of shame rising up my neck. I was about to cry again. I could feel it coming. The tight throat. The burning eyes. The overwhelming sense that I was a failure who could not even find her own car in a grocery store parking lot. And then a voice said, "You look like you need help." I turned around. A man was standing there. Tall. Maybe 45. Wearing a flannel shirt and jeans. Holding a bag of oranges. He had a beard that was graying at the edges and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. My first instinct was fear. A stranger talking to me in a parking lot? Back home, that was dangerous. But this was Ohio. And Ohio, I had learned, was full of people who talked to strangers for no reason. So I swallowed my fear and said, in my slow, broken English, "I cannot find my car. The key does not work." He did not laugh. He did not look impatient. He said, "What color is your car?" I said, "Gray." He looked around at the sea of gray minivans and smiled. "Okay. That narrows it down to about 40 cars. Do you remember where you parked?" I shook my head. I felt stupid. He said, "That's okay. Let's walk. Press the panic button on your key fob. Even if the doors don't unlock, the horn might work." I pressed the button. Nothing. He said, "The battery is completely dead. New plan. Do you remember any stores near where you parked?" I thought hard. There was a big red sign. Target. He nodded. The Target is on the other side of the parking lot. Let's go that way. And then he did something unexpected. He started walking next to me. Not in front of me. Not behind me. Next to me. Like we were friends. Like this was normal. Like finding a lost car with a stranger in a parking lot was just another Saturday. We walked for about 5 minutes. He did not ask me personal questions. He did not ask where I was from or why my English was slow. He just talked about the weather, about how the oranges were on sale, about how his daughter had lost her jacket 3 times last year. He spoke slowly. Clearly. Without patronizing me. I realized later that he was a father. He knew how to talk to people who were scared. He treated me like a scared child, not in a bad way, but in a gentle way. Like I was someone who needed a little extra patience. And that patience, more than anything else, is what made me look up and really see him. He was not handsome in a movie star way. He was handsome in a real way. The kind of handsome that comes from being kind when you do not have to be. We found my van. It was exactly where I had left it, 4 rows from the Target sign. I pressed the unlock button again, even though I knew it would not work. He said, "Do you have jumper cables?" I said, "I do not know what that is." He laughed. Not a mean laugh. A warm laugh. They're cables that connect your car battery to another car battery to start the engine. I have some in my truck. I'll be right back. He walked away. And I stood there, holding a child's jacket in a grocery store parking lot, thinking, is this real? Is this how people meet in America? He came back with the cables. He connected them. My van started. I said, "Thank you. Thank you very much." He said, "You're welcome. By the way, my name is Mike." I told him my name. He smiled again. And then he said something that changed everything. "I don't usually do this, but would you like to get coffee sometime?" "Not today. I can see you've had a rough day. But maybe next week? There's a quiet cafe near here. Nothing fancy. Just coffee." My brain screamed, "No. Stranger. Danger. You have children. You are vulnerable. Your English is terrible. You will embarrass yourself." But my heart, my tired, lonely, desperate heart, whispered, "Say yes. You have said no to everything for years. Say yes to something. Just once." So I said, "Okay. Coffee. Next week." That was the smallest yes I had ever spoken. It was quieter than a whisper. But it was the yes that rebuilt my life. Because every big change starts with a tiny yes. A yes to coffee. A yes to a parking lot stranger. A yes to being seen when you feel invisible. A yes to the possibility that you are not broken forever. Now, let me pause here because I know what some of you are thinking. A random man in a parking lot? That sounds dangerous. You should have said no. And you are right. In many situations, saying no is the safe choice. But here is what I have learned about safety. Sometimes we use safety as an excuse to stay closed. Sometimes we say, "It is dangerous," when we really mean "I am scared." And fear, as we have discussed, is not always a good guide. Mike was not a threat. He was a gift. And I almost missed that gift because my amygdala was screaming stranger danger at the top of its lungs. But I had been practicing ignoring my amygdala. I had been practicing saying yes to small things. Ordering coffee. Asking for directions. Talking to myself in English. All of those small yeses had trained me to trust myself again. So when the big yes came, the yes that could lead to love, to partnership, to a second chance at family, I was ready. Not perfectly ready. Not confidently ready. But ready enough. Because ready enough is all any of us ever are. So here is my question to you as you listen to this story. What is the tiny yes you have been avoiding? A conversation? A class? A message to an old friend? A first step toward learning English that you have put off for years? Your brain will give you 1,000 reasons to say no. Your brain is good at that. But your life is not built from no. Your life is built from yes. Tiny, terrifying, beautiful yeses that lead to parking lots, which lead to coffee, which lead to love, which lead to a home you never thought you deserved. Say yes. Just once. See what happens. The worst case is you drink a bad coffee and go home alone. The best case is you find your car, your keys, and your future all in the same afternoon. I found mine. And his name was Mike. Learning to speak again, in English. The coffee date was not a date. At least, that is what I told myself for the entire week between the parking lot and the cafe. It is just coffee. 2 people. 1 table. Caffeine. Nothing more. I practiced that lie in the mirror every morning. But my hands kept sweating. My stomach kept flipping. And my brain kept playing the same terrifying movie, me, opening my mouth, trying to speak English. And failing so completely that Mike would politely excuse himself and I would walk home alone. Forever cemented in my own memory as the woman who could not even hold a conversation over a latte. The cafe was small. Quiet. Exactly as Mike had described. Wooden tables. Soft lighting. The smell of roasted beans and cinnamon. I arrived 10 minutes early because I was raised that way. I ordered a hot tea because coffee made my hands shake even more. I sat at a table by the window so I could watch him walk in. And then I waited. 5 minutes. 10 minutes. My heart was beating so loudly that I was sure the barista could hear it. Then the door opened. Mike walked in. He was wearing the same flannel shirt. Same kind eyes. Same warm smile that made me feel like I had already been forgiven for every mistake I had not made yet. He said, "Hi. You came." I said, "Yes. I came." 2 words. But they were the right 2 words. He ordered a black coffee. Sat down across from me. And then the real test began. Not the test of whether we liked each other. The test of whether I could survive 30 minutes of English conversation without running to the bathroom to cry. Here is what happened. I spoke slowly. Painfully slowly. Each sentence took me 5 times longer than it would take a native speaker. I searched for words like a person searching for keys in a dark room. I said thing when I could not remember spoon. I said place when I could not remember cafe. I mixed up he and she. I used the wrong tense. I forgot the word yesterday and said the day before today. It was a disaster. By any standard of fluent English, it was a disaster. But here is the miracle, Mike did not care. He did not correct me. He did not finish my sentences. He did not look at his phone. He just listened. He leaned forward slightly, the way you lean forward when someone is telling you something important. He nodded. He smiled. He asked simple questions. And then what happened? How did that make you feel? What do your children think? He spoke slowly too. Not because he was mocking me. Because he was matching me. He was building a bridge from his English to my English. And that bridge, imperfect as it was, held both of us. At one point, I tried to say, I miss the food from my country. But I could not remember the word miss. So I said, my heart feels hungry for the food from my country. Mike did not laugh. He said, that's beautiful. My heart feels hungry. I've never heard anyone say it that way. Can I use that? I blinked. He wanted to use my broken English phrase? My incorrect, grammatically strange, slightly poetic phrase? Yes. He did. Because that is the secret that no textbook will tell you. Broken English is not ugly. Broken English is creative. When you do not know the right word, you invent a new one. When you cannot find the correct structure, you build a different one. And sometimes, that different structure is more honest, more vivid, more memorable than the perfect sentence a native speaker would have used. My heart feels hungry. That is not wrong. That is art. I had never thought of my language mistakes as art before. I had only thought of them as failures. But sitting in that cafe, watching Mike write my words on a napkin because he genuinely liked them, I realized something that changed my relationship with English forever. Perfection is overrated. Connection is not. We talked for 2 hours. Not 30 minutes. 2 hours. I told him about my divorce. About the 3 suitcases. About the Starbucks meltdown. About my children who now spoke English better than me. About my mother, still sick back home, who called me every Sunday and cried because she missed her grandchildren. I told him things I had not told anyone. Not because I trusted him completely, I did not. Not yet, but because I had been silent for so long that the words were bursting out of me like water from a broken pipe. And every time I made a mistake, every time I said I goed instead of I went or she have instead of she has, Mike did not flinch. He just kept listening. Kept nodding. Kept being present. That was the first time in my life that I spoke English without shame. Not because my English was better. Because my listener was better. And that taught me something crucial about language learning that I want you to hear right now. You will never speak fluently if you only practice with people who judge you. You need someone who sees your effort, not your errors. You need someone who hears your heart, not your grammar. You need someone like Mike. If you do not have a Mike yet, keep looking. They exist. They are often patient. They are often people who have also struggled with something hard. They are often people who know that courage is louder than correctness. Before we left the cafe, Mike looked at me and said, "Your English is not bad. Your English is in progress. There is a difference." I almost cried. Not from sadness. From relief. Someone had finally said it. I was not bad at English. I was just not finished yet. And being unfinished is not a failure. Being unfinished is the natural state of every human being who is still alive. The only people who are finished are the ones who stopped trying. I had not stopped. I was sitting in a cafe in Ohio, drinking tea, making mistakes, and still, somehow, making a connection. That was not nothing. That was everything. Mike asked if we could do this again next week. I said yes. Then I went home, closed the door to my sister's spare room, and wrote in my notebook, "Today I spoke English for 2 hours. I made many mistakes. Nobody died. I am still learning. And maybe, just maybe, I am also still lovable." That last sentence was the most important one. Because before that day, I had believed that my broken English made me unworthy of love. That is a lie. A cruel, common, devastating lie. Your English level has nothing to do with your worthiness. You can love and be loved in any language. You can love and be loved with 200 words or 2,000. Love does not require a vocabulary test. Love requires presence. It requires patience. It requires looking at someone across a small wooden table and saying, "I see you. I hear you. Keep going." That is what Mike gave me. That is what I want you to give yourself. Keep going. Speak slowly. Make mistakes. Let your heart feel hungry. And trust that the right people will not run away from your broken sentences. They will sit with you. They will lean in. And they will help you build a new language, one imperfect word at a time. Blending wounds, building a home. Falling in love at 42 with broken English and 2 children is not like falling in love at 20. At 20, you believe love will solve everything. At 42, you know better. You know that love does not solve problems. Love just gives you the courage to face problems together. Mike and I dated for 8 months before we even talked about marriage. 8 months of slow coffee dates, awkward phone calls where I searched for words, and long walks through Ohio parks where I practiced describing trees and clouds and squirrels in English. He met my children after 6 months. I was terrified. My daughter, who was 8, had watched her father leave. She had watched me cry in airports. She had watched me struggle to order coffee. She did not trust easily. And my son, who was 6, was still young enough to be hopeful but old enough to remember the fighting. The first time Mike came to my sister's apartment for dinner, my daughter hid in the bedroom for 20 minutes. My son stared at Mike like he was an alien from a different planet. Mike did not push. He did not bring gifts or try too hard. He just sat on the couch, talked to me slowly in English, and let the children come to him when they were ready. My son came first. He asked Mike, "Do you like dinosaurs?" Mike said, "I love dinosaurs." "What is your favorite?" My son said, "T-Rex." Mike said, "Good choice." T-Rex had the strongest bite of any land animal. That was it. That was the bridge. A dinosaur. My son climbed onto the couch next to Mike and showed him a toy T-Rex. My daughter stayed in the bedroom for the entire dinner. She ate her food on the floor behind the bed. I wanted to cry. But Mike said, "It's okay. She's protecting herself." That's smart. I would do the same thing. He did not take it personally. That is the mark of a good step-parent. They do not take rejection personally. They understand that the children are not rejecting them. The children are protecting the only home they have left. Building a blended family is hard even when everyone speaks the same language. When you add a language barrier, it becomes a daily exercise in patience and creativity. Mike spoke only English. My children were becoming fluent, but I still struggled. So our house became a place where mistakes were normal. Where we pointed at objects instead of naming them. Where we used Google Translate at the dinner table. Where we laughed when I said, "I am going to cook the chicken in the bathroom instead of kitchen." Yes, that happened. The words bathroom and kitchen were stored in the same drawer of my brain, and sometimes I opened the wrong drawer. My daughter eventually stopped hiding. It took 4 months. 4 months of Mike showing up, being kind, not forcing anything. One evening, she walked up to him and said, "My mom says you are nice. But I will decide for myself." Mike said, "That is fair. Take all the time you need." She looked at him for a long moment. Then she sat down next to him and asked, "Do you like unicorns?" Mike said, "I do not know much about unicorns. Can you teach me?" That was the beginning. Not a dramatic movie scene. Just a girl, a man, and a mythical horse. That is how trust is built. Not in grand gestures. In small, repeated moments of showing up and not leaving. We got married in a small courthouse when I was 43. No white dress. No flowers. No family from my home country because plane tickets were too expensive. Just Mike, me, my 2 children, my sister, and a judge who spoke so fast that I only understood every third word. But I understood the important words. "Do you take this man?" I said, "Yes." That was the easiest yes I had ever said. Easier than coffee. Easier than parking lot. Because by then, I knew that Mike was not a risk. He was a safe place. And a safe place, especially for someone who had spent years sleeping on the edge of a bed, is worth more than fluency. It is worth more than grammar. It is worth more than perfect pronunciation. Because you can learn pronunciation later. You cannot learn safety from a textbook. Safety is felt. Safety is earned. And Mike had earned it, one dinosaur conversation at a time. After the wedding, we moved into a small house. Not a new house. An old house with creaky floors and a leaky faucet and a backyard that was mostly weeds. But it was ours. The first night, we sat on the floor of the empty living room because the furniture had not arrived yet. My children were asleep in their new bedroom. Mike and I sat cross-legged on the hardwood floor, eating pizza from a cardboard box. I looked around at the bare walls, the unpacked boxes, the dust on the windowsills. And I said, in my slow English, "This is not a perfect house." Mike said, "No. But it is a home. Do you know the difference?" I shook my head. He said, "A house is where you live. A home is where you can make mistakes and still belong." That sentence rewired something in my brain. For years, I had believed that I needed perfect English to belong in America. But Mike was telling me that belonging does not come from language. Belonging comes from being accepted exactly as you are. With your accent. With your grammar errors. With your bathroom instead of kitchen. With your children who hide in bedrooms and your heart that still flinches at loud noises. I belonged in that house not because I spoke well. I belonged because I was loved. Living with Mike taught me English faster than any class could. Because I had to speak. Every day. About small things. Where are my keys? What do you want for dinner? Can you pick up my daughter from school? I am tired. I am happy. I am scared. I love you. Those last 3 words took me 6 months to say. Not because I did not feel them. Because they felt too big for my limited vocabulary. I was afraid that saying I love you in broken English would make it sound less true. But one night, after a long day of parenting and work and life, I looked at Mike and said, "My heart has a big feeling for you." I do not know the right word. But it is the biggest feeling. Mike put down his book. He looked at me. And he said, "The word is love. And your English is perfect because your heart is in it." That is when I understood, language is not about words. Language is about meaning. And meaning does not require perfection. It requires honesty. That night, I said I love you in English for the first time. It came out slow. It came out shaky. It came out with my accent wrapped around every syllable. But it was true. And true is the only thing that matters. So if you are out there, afraid to speak because your English is not good enough, remember this, the people who matter will not grade your grammar. They will feel your heart. And your heart, unlike your verb tenses, is already fluent. The day my daughter corrected my English. There is a moment every immigrant parent dreads. It is not the moment you cannot find a job. It is not the moment you cry in a parking lot. It is the moment your child, your own flesh and blood, The person you taught to tie their shoes and say their first words looks at you with pity and says, "Mom, that's not how you say it." That moment came for me on a Tuesday afternoon in October. My daughter was 8. She had been in American schools for almost a year. Her English was now faster, sharper, and more confident than mine. I was helping her with her homework. A worksheet about animals. The question said, "Write 3 facts about bats." I read the question out loud to help her. I said, "Bats are the only mammals that can truly fly." My daughter looked at me. Not with anger. Not with cruelty. With something worse, gentle correction. "Mom, it's truly, not truly. You're putting an extra sound in the middle." I stared at the word. Truly. I had been saying it wrong for years. I had said it wrong in job interviews. I had said it wrong to Mike. I had said it wrong to my sister. And nobody had told me. Because people are polite. People do not want to embarrass you. But children are not polite. Children are honest. And that honesty, as much as it stung, was also a gift. I said, "Thank you." "Can you say it again, slowly?" She said, "Truly." 2 sounds. Not 3. I repeated after her. Truly. She nodded. Better. Then she went back to her worksheet. Just like that. 3 seconds of correction. A lifetime of saying a word incorrectly, fixed in a single exchange. I walked to the kitchen and stood by the sink, holding the edge of the counter, breathing deeply. I was not angry at my daughter. I was not even embarrassed. I was something more complicated. I was proud of her. And I was mourning the version of myself who had gone so long without being corrected. That version was lonely. That version had no one to say, "Hey, you are saying that wrong, and that is okay, but here is the right way." That version had only silence and politeness. Politeness is kind, but politeness does not teach. Correction teaches. And correction, when delivered with love, is not an attack. It is a map. That night, I told Mike what happened. I expected him to comfort me. Instead, he laughed. Not a mean laugh. A recognizing laugh. He said, "My son corrected my pronunciation of Chipotle for 3 years before I got it right." Children are ruthless. But they are also right. He was right. Children are ruthless because they have not yet learned the adult habit of pretending. Adults smile and nod when you say truly because they do not want to hurt your feelings. But your feelings are not the point. The point is learning. And learning requires feedback. Real feedback. The kind that feels like a small slap but wakes you up. My daughter had given me that slap. And I decided, right there in the kitchen, that I would stop being afraid of correction. I would invite it. I made a new rule in our house. Anyone could correct anyone's English, as long as they did it kindly. No shaming. No laughing. Just as simple, the word is actually underscore 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 underscore, and then we would repeat it together. My daughter loved this rule. She corrected me at least 5 times a day. "Mom, it's library, not library." "Mom, it's probably, not probably." "Mom, it's asked, not axed." Each correction stung for a second. Then it stuck. And slowly, my English improved faster than it had in months. Because I had stopped hiding my mistakes. I had put them on the table, in the open, where they could be fixed. Here is the science behind this. Your brain learns languages through a process called error-driven learning. Every time you make a mistake and receive corrective feedback, your brain releases a small burst of dopamine. Not a big burst, not like winning a prize, but a small, focused burst that says, pay attention. This is useful information. That dopamine helps solidify the correct form in your memory. But here is the catch, you only get that dopamine if you actually receive the feedback. If you avoid correction, if you only speak when you are sure you are right, your brain never gets the signal. You plateau. You stop improving. You keep saying truly for years because nobody loves you enough to tell you the truth. That is why children learn languages faster than adults. Not because their brains are better. Because they are corrected constantly, and they do not take it personally. A 5-year-old does not feel shame when a parent says, "No, that's a spoon, not a fork." They just absorb the correction and move on. Adults, on the other hand, have built entire identities around being competent. When someone corrects our English, we hear, "You are not good enough." But that is not what correction means. Correction means, you are in progress. And progress requires direction. After the Truly incident, I started asking for corrections explicitly. At the grocery store, I would say to the cashier, "My English is not perfect. Please tell me if I say a word wrong." Most cashiers looked confused. Some said, "Oh no, you're fine." But a brave few, actually helped. One cashier named Darlene corrected my pronunciation of coupon. I had been saying coupon. She said, "It's coupon." Like coo as in pigeon sound. I laughed. I repeated it. She nodded. Every time I went to that store, Darlene would greet me with, "Hey, it's my coupon lady." That became a joke between us. A joke that taught me a word. A joke that turned a stranger into a friend. That is what happens when you stop being embarrassed. You invite people into your learning journey. And people love being invited. People love being helpful. Most humans, it turns out, want to be your teacher. They just do not want to be rude. So you have to give them permission. You have to say, "Correct me. I can take it. I want to learn." The biggest correction from my daughter came 6 months later. I was reading her a bedtime story. The Very Hungry Caterpillar. A classic. I read, on Monday, he ate through 1 apple. But he was still hungry. My daughter stopped me. "Mom, it's hungry, not hungry. You're dropping the G." I looked at the word. Hungry. 2 syllables. I had been saying it as 1.5 my whole life. She said, "Say it with me." Hungry. Hungry. We said it together 5 times. Then I continued reading. When I finished the book, she hugged me and said, "Good job, Mom. You're getting better." I held her tight and felt something I had never felt before in my role as a mother, humility mixed with pride. She was my teacher now. And that was exactly as it should be. Because learning is not a one-way street. Parents teach children. Children teach parents. Immigrants teach locals. Locals teach immigrants. We are all students. We are all teachers. The only failure is refusing to learn. That night, I wrote in my notebook, "Today my daughter taught me how to say hungry. I am still hungry for English. And that is okay. Hunger is not shame. Hunger is how we grow. If you are watching this and you have children who speak better English than you, do not hide from them. Do not feel small. Let them teach you. Let them correct you. Let them be your tiny, ruthless, loving pronunciation coaches. Because one day, they will look back and realize that you taught them something more important than any word. You taught them that it is never too late to learn. And that being corrected is not a loss of dignity. It is an act of courage. Was it worth it? Here is the question that has been hiding under every sentence of this story, and I cannot avoid it any longer. Was it worth it? Leaving your country, your language, your marriage, your old self behind at 40 years old, packing 3 suitcases, crying in parking lots, freezing in Ohio winters, humiliating yourself at Starbucks, being corrected by your own child, was any of it worth the pain? I asked myself this question every single day for the first 2 years. In the shower. In the car. In the middle of the night when I could not sleep because my brain was replaying every mistake I had ever made in English. And for a long time, I did not have an answer. I had hope, but hope is not an answer. I had effort, but effort is not a result. I had a new husband and a small house and children who were thriving, but deep in my chest, there was still a cold knot of doubt. Did I ruin my life? Did I drag my children into a disaster because I was too weak to stay in a dead marriage? Would I have been happier if I had just learned to live with the silence, the empty side of the bed, the slow suffocation of a loveless home? These questions are not rational. They are emotional. And emotions do not care about logic. They care about fear. So let me answer the question directly, with the honesty I have tried to bring to every part of this story. Was starting over at 40 worth it? The answer is yes. But not for the reasons you might think. It was not worth it because I became fluent in English. I did not. I am still not fluent. I make mistakes every day. My accent will never disappear. I still say truly sometimes when I am tired, and my daughter still corrects me. Fluency was never the prize. The prize was something else entirely. The prize was waking up one morning and realizing that I was not afraid anymore. Not completely, not all the time, but in the small, daily moments that used to paralyze me. I was not afraid to answer the phone. I was not afraid to talk to my daughter's teacher. I was not afraid to tell Mike that I loved him in my broken English. The fear had not disappeared, fear never fully disappears, but it had moved from the driver's seat to the back seat. It was still in the car, but it was not steering. And that shift, that tiny internal rearrangement, was worth every tear I shed in that shower. Because fear is not just an emotion. Fear is a jailer. And I had spent 15 years in a marriage that was not abusive but was empty, and emptiness is its own kind of prison. You do not need bars to be trapped. You just need a bed with a meter of silence between you and the person who promised to love you. I traded that silence for a small house with creaky floors and a husband who says good morning every single day in a voice that sounds like he actually means it. That trade was worth it. Let me give you a specific example. Last Christmas, we were all in the living room. Mike, me, my daughter, my son. The tree was crooked because my son had decorated the bottom third himself. There was tinsel everywhere. The dog had eaten one of the ornaments. It was chaotic and imperfect and exactly what I had dreamed about during those lonely nights in my sister's spare room. My daughter looked at me and said, "Mom, what was your favorite Christmas when you were little?" I had to answer in English. I could not switch to my native language because Mike does not speak it. So I took a breath, and I said, when I was 7, my grandmother gave me a red bicycle. I rode it around the kitchen table because it was snowing outside. I fell 3 times. My knees bled. But I did not stop. My daughter smiled. Mike squeezed my hand. And I realized that I had just told a story from my childhood in English. Not perfect English. Not fast English. But English that was understood. English that was felt. That moment, a crooked tree, a dead dog ornament, a story about a bicycle, that moment was worth every single second of struggle. Because that moment would not have existed if I had stayed in my old life. In my old life, Christmas was silent. In my old life, my ex-husband watched television while the children opened presents. In my old life, I was a ghost. Now I am a person. A person with bad grammar and a good life. That is the trade. Here is what the research says about starting over. Studies on life satisfaction show that people who make major changes, divorce, career shifts, moving to a new country, experience a significant drop in happiness for the first 12 to 18 months. Their brains are overloaded with stress hormones. Their sleep suffers. Their confidence craters. But after that initial period, if the change was the right one, their happiness does not just return to baseline. It surpasses it. Because the brain adapts to new circumstances, and sometimes, the new circumstances are genuinely better. The key variable is not the change itself. The key variable is whether you were truly unhappy before. If you were, the pain of change is temporary. The pain of staying is permanent. I had to learn that lesson the hard way. I had to live through the freeze and the loneliness and the shame. But on the other side of that freeze, there was spring. Not a perfect spring. Not a spring without weeds. But a spring where things grew. Where I grew. That is what worth it means. It does not mean easy. It means the hard part led somewhere that mattered. So let me answer the question one more time, as clearly as I can. Was starting over at 40 scary? Yes. Terrifying. Paralyzing. There were nights when I regretted everything. There were mornings when I wanted to buy a plane ticket and go back to my old country and pretend the last 2 years had never happened. But I did not. Because I had tasted something new. A life where I was seen. A life where I was allowed to be imperfect. A life where my children watched me struggle and learned that struggling is not shameful. That is the gift I gave them, and the gift they gave me. We learned together that courage is not the absence of fear. Courage is being afraid and staying anyway. Courage is ordering coffee with a shaking hand. Courage is saying I love you in a language you are still learning. Courage is letting your 8-year-old correct your pronunciation and thanking her for it. That is what I want you to take from this story. Not that I am brave. I am not. I am just a woman who got tired of being a ghost. And if you are tired too, tired of the empty side of the bed, tired of the silence, tired of your own fear, then take a small step. Just one. Not a giant leap. A tiny yes. A coffee. A parking lot. A correction. That step will not fix everything. But it will prove to you that you are still alive. And alive, my friend, is where all worth begins. A new kind of slow life. Today is Christmas morning. Not the Christmas of my childhood, with my grandmother's red bicycle and snow outside the window. Not the silent Christmas of my marriage, with a television buzzing and a husband who had stopped looking at me years ago. This is a different kind of Christmas. I am 46 now. 6 years have passed since I stood under that shower and cried. 6 years since I packed 3 suitcases and flew to a country where I could not order coffee. I am sitting on a couch in a small house with creaky floors. The Christmas tree is crooked again because my son, who is now 12, still insists on decorating the bottom third himself. My daughter, now 14, is curled up in a blanket, scrolling through her phone, occasionally laughing at something I will never understand. Mike is in the kitchen making pancakes. The dog, a rescue we adopted 2 years ago, a ridiculous creature with one floppy ear, is sleeping on my feet. And I am drinking coffee. Not instant coffee from my sister's pantry. Real coffee. The kind I learned to order without a sticky note. The kind I can now ask for in English without my hands shaking. Medium hot coffee with oat milk, please. I can say that sentence in my sleep. It took 4 years, but I can say it. The house is quiet, but it is not the quiet of loneliness. It is the quiet of contentment. The kind of quiet that comes when you are exactly where you are supposed to be, even if you cannot explain why. My English is still slow. That has not changed. I speak more slowly than most Americans. I pause between sentences. I search for words sometimes, and when I cannot find them, I invent new ones. Mike calls my English poetic because I say things like my heart feels hungry and the sky is wearing a gray sweater. He is being kind, but he is also telling the truth. My English is not fast, but it is mine. It carries my accent, my mistakes, my strange word choices, and also my story. Every time I open my mouth, I am telling the world where I came from and how hard I fought to stay. That is not a weakness. That is a signature. I have stopped apologizing for my accent. I have stopped saying sorry before every sentence. I have stopped shrinking. That was the real goal all along. Not perfect English. A perfect life? No. A real life. A life where I am seen and loved and allowed to be a work in progress. My children are thriving in ways I could not have imagined. My daughter wants to be a writer. She writes stories in English, beautiful stories about dragons and girls who are not afraid. She still corrects my pronunciation, but now she does it with a smile, and I say thank you every time because she is not just my daughter anymore. She is my teacher. And I am proud to be her student. My son wants to be an engineer. He builds things with Legos and speaks English with an American accent so perfect that people are shocked when they learn he was not born here. He does not remember our home country much. He remembers the airplane, the 3 suitcases, the snow. But he does not remember the fighting. He does not remember the empty side of the bed. That is a gift I gave him. A gift I gave myself. The gift of leaving before the damage became permanent. Some people think staying together for the children is noble. I used to think that too. But I have learned that children do not need 2 parents in the same house. They need parents who are not dying inside. They need parents who can smile without pretending. They need parents who show them that it is never too late to choose happiness. I gave my children that. Not easily. Not perfectly. But I gave it. Mike comes out of the kitchen with a stack of pancakes. He sets them on the table, and we eat together. No one looks at a phone. No one turns on the television. We just talk. About nothing. About everything. About the dog's weird ear. About whether we should paint the living room blue or gray. About my mother, who is still alive, still in our home country, and who I call every Sunday. She has never visited America. She is afraid of flying. But she has seen our house through video calls, and she has heard Mike say hello in his kind voice. And she has stopped crying when she talks to my children because she knows they are safe. That was another gift. Not closure. But peace. The kind of peace that comes when your mother stops worrying about you because you have finally stopped worrying about yourself. After breakfast, we open presents. My daughter gives me a notebook. On the cover, she has written in gold marker, "For Mom, who taught me that brave is better than perfect." I cry. Of course I cry. I have become a person who cries easily, but only at good things. Only at love. Mike gives me a necklace with a small charm shaped like an airplane. He says, "Because you were brave enough to take the flight." I put it on and wear it every day now. My son gives me a drawing. It is a picture of our family, Mike, me, him, his sister, the dog. 4 stick figures and a lump with floppy ears. Underneath, he has written, "Home is where we make mistakes together." He is 6 years old in that drawing. No, wait. He is 12. But his heart is still 6. That is the best part of children. They grow up, but their hearts stay soft if you protect them. I protected my children's hearts by leaving. That is the truth that no one tells you. Sometimes the most protective thing a mother can do is walk away from a situation that is slowly breaking her. Because broken mothers cannot raise whole children. I was broken. Now I am not whole, not completely, but I am healing. And healing is enough. So let me return to the question that started this entire video. Starting over at 40 was scary, was it worth it? Yes. 1,000 times yes. Not because everything worked out perfectly. It did not. I still have bad days. I still miss my home country. I still dream in my native language and wake up confused. My English still gets stuck in my throat when I am tired or scared or sad. But I am not scared of being scared anymore. That is the difference. That is everything. I learned that fear is not a stop sign. Fear is just a feeling. And feelings, unlike flights, do not have to determine your destination. You can be afraid and still order coffee. You can be afraid and still say yes to a stranger in a parking lot. You can be afraid and still let your daughter correct your English. Fear is not the boss of you. You are the boss of you. And if you are watching this video right now, somewhere in the world, feeling stuck and small and convinced that it is too late for you to change your life, I want you to hear this. It is not too late. It is never too late. I started over at 40 with nothing but 3 suitcases and a broken heart. I am not special. I am not exceptionally brave. I am just a woman who got tired of being a ghost. And if I can do it, you can do it. Not the same way. Not the same story. But your own version. Your own tiny yes. Your own slow English. Your own crooked Christmas tree. It will not be perfect. But it will be yours. And yours is worth fighting for. You have just listened to a woman who lost everything, moved across the world with 3 suitcases, cried in parking lots, and slowly, painfully, beautifully rebuilt her life from scratch. But here is the secret I have not told you yet. This is not the end of my story. This is only the beginning of ours. Because starting next week, I will share something I have never shared before, the raw, unedited audio diaries from my first year in America. The nights I thought I would not make it. The phone calls with my mother that broke me. The moment I almost booked a one-way ticket back home. And the single sentence Mike said that stopped me from leaving. You have heard the highlights. Now I will take you into the shadows. But only if you are ready. Only if you subscribe, hit the bell, and promise to come back. So here's my call to action. Do not just watch this video once. Save it to your English learning playlist. Listen to it again tomorrow at half speed. Repeat my sentences out loud when nobody is watching. Make mistakes. Sound ridiculous. That is how I learned. That is how you will learn too. And while you practice, ask yourself the question that changed my life. What is the one thing I am too scared to start over? Write it in the comments below. Not for me. For you. Because the moment you name your fear, it stops being the monster under the bed. It becomes just a word. And words, my friend, can be learned. One slow sentence at a time. Subscribe now. Turn on notifications. And next week, I will tell you what almost made me give up. See you on the other side of fear.